Wait. That's not good. Right, come on.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to Bnai Torah. We really appreciate everyone coming out here today and joining us for this wonderful program. We'd like to thank the Beit Midrash Zichron Dov for supporting Bnai Torah for all these years. Special salute to Rabbi Turchiner and the wonderful relationship that he has here with our shul. We'd like to welcome today Rabbi Sammy Bergman, Rabbi Alex Taft, Rabbi Turchiner, and Ezra Deanna, who will be speaking on the topic of Purim. And so often we get caught up in all the festivities and rituals of Purim that we don't actually take the time to reflect on the true message. So this is a wonderful opportunity to get us into the Purim mode so that we can reflect on what the true meaning of Purim is. So without any further ado, I'm going to call up Rabbi Turchiner.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Alan, and in absentia, Rasha Frankel, for their work in enabling this program. The program was originally intended, as I think many of you know, for Shlema, for performing Pesach David Ben Avram, and Shloshim is now coming up on Purim, so we felt it appropriate to instead dedicate our learning Le'ilui Nishmaso in his memory. I'll mention a little bit more about him and my relationship with him before I speak, but at the moment I'm going to introduce Rabbi Bergman, our Skan, who's in his first year here in Toronto, and I think it's his first time speaking at Bnai Torah, to speak on Megillat E-Satire, Megillat Esther.
Morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on a cold Sunday morning. Just to echo Rabbi Torchiner's sentiments, all the Torah this morning is Eli Nishmas, the soul of Paul Foreman. I did not have the privilege of knowing him personally, but I have heard about the wonderful things he contributed to the community, and it's only fitting that we recite Torah in his memory. Okay, so the topic, the program this morning is we're all going to talk about Purim from different aspects of the holiday, and focusing on different genres in Torah. And my focus this morning is going to be on Medrash. But I'd like to begin from a different vantage point. Purim is a very wacky holiday. There's all sorts of behavior that we see on Purim, customarily, that seems to be atypical to Jewish behavior. There's Purim spiels making fun of Rebbeim and the like. We dress up. There are Purim carnivals, right? No one ever heard of a Pesach carnival. There are Purim carnivals, right? It's almost frivolous in a certain sense. There's a certain lightheadedness associated with Purim that is a bit odd. Why do you think that is? Why is it that we act so differently on Purim? I guess I'm asking for any answers from the audience. Yes?
Yes. It's because everything in Purim is hidden. The whole story is hidden. Esther hides her identity, you know, that's why, because we're like undercover, but pre-Mossad.
Okay, the hiding of the identity. Any other thoughts? So I'm going to echo your sentiments in that I believe that the holiday of Purim is very much linked with the Megillah, the text associated with the holiday. And that this attitude, this lightheadedness, this humor, this comedy, is part of the Megillah itself. Take a look at the first source. It's just a quote from Adele Berlin. She's a well-known biblical commentator. She wrote the JPS Bible commentary on the Megillah. And tell me if you agree or disagree with this quotation. It is a comedy, a book meant to be funny, to provoke laughter. The book of Esther is the most humorous of the books in the Bible, amusing throughout and at certain points uproariously funny. The comic aspects of the book are not incidental, merely to provide comic relief. They are the essence of the book. They define the genre of the book and thus set the parameters according to which we should read it. We cannot appreciate the story fully unless we realize that it is meant to be funny. Okay, agree or disagree? Any thoughts? Disagree, okay. So can we get one volunteer to say why they disagree?
Because it has to do with the destruction of the Jewish people.
It has to do with, okay, so your point is, what part of this statement do you disagree with?
That it's funny.
That it's funny. You don't think it's a funny book. Yeah, I think I'm going to get 10 other eyes. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I think that it's the sad story of Esther having brought into the harem of Achashverosh and not ever being able to live with her Mordechai, her husband, again. I thought that's very sad.
That is quite sad. Agreed. My only point would be that it's 100% sad. I don't know that that sadness comes from the story itself. I don't know that if you read Megillat Esther, you come out thinking about how unfortunate it is that Esther is a queen, but I 100% agree with that. My contention is going to be, I'm going to argue, is that this is correct and incorrect. I don't think the main point is the humor. I don't think that's the essence of the book. I do think that there are certain scenes in the story that are certainly meant to be funny and humorous. And what I'd like to demonstrate today is that that humor and comedy actually hints at a very important message that we're meant to take from the Megillah. Before we go on, though, are there any scenes that we can think of that certainly seem to be funny from the Megillah story? Any that stand out to you? Yes. Haman having garbage thrown in his head. Excellent answer. That's not quite in the Megillah itself, but certainly the scene of Haman, so eager to always be the most important, the most honorable, to bestow so much honor upon himself, goes to Achashverosh's house with the intention of getting Haman hanged. And what happens instead? He has to bring Mordechai on the king's royal horse throughout the kingdom, shouting, "This is what happens to one upon whom the king wishes to bestow honor." That is hilarious. We're very used to the story, but if you think about it, it certainly seems to be a scene meant to get the audience to laugh at Haman. Any other thoughts? Yes?
Maybe it isn't so much humor as it is irony.
Irony, okay.
What do you think?
He said it's irony. I think it's a certain satire, meaning it's a humor not just for the sake of entertainment. It's, I think, a humor meant to mock Haman. Mock Haman in his attempts at gaining this prestige within the kingdom. Yeah.
The thing that really comes out to me is I think it's mocking Achashverosh in a very respectful way. It's like tongue-in-cheek. So if you read it really straight, it's very honors him, and if you read it between the lines, they're mocking him.
Thank you. But what's your name?
Lila.
Lila. I love Lila's point, and with that, we're going to go to source one. So if you look at the first chapter in the Megillah, it's a bit hard to understand why it's there. Right? We learn about this big, elaborate feast that Achashverosh prepares for first the people in Shushan and the entire kingdom, and we wonder what in the world does this have to do with anything. Now, looking at the story in a simple level, when we learn about Achashverosh's wealth and royalty, what impressions do you have of him as a reader? Or what do you think the author wants you to think about him at first glance? Well, at first glance, I would think what the author wants you to think is that Achashverosh is a great, wealthy king. He's powerful. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. So let's take a look at this first source. This is from the very beginning of Esther. It says, "Vahi b'mei Achashverosh, shu Achashverosh, hamelech me'odu v'yakosh sheba v'atzur me'yav medina." It was in the days of Achashverosh. He was the Achashverosh who ruled from Hodu until Cush, 127 states. In those days when the king Achashverosh sat on his throne, Asher b'Shushan Abira in Shushan. B'shenat shaloshim mako asam mishtelecho sarav avadalcha parasim adaya partamim v'sareha mdino lefanav. The third year of his reign, he made a feast for all the officers and his servants, the soldiers, or nobility of Persia and Media, all the important people in front of him. Now, look at this next line. V'haroto et osher kivod malchuto v'et yikar teferet gedulato. And he was showing the wealth of the honor of his kingdom and the glory of the splendor of his greatness. What do you think about those phrases? The glory of the splendor of his greatness. A little bit over the top, right? You could picture someone going out and saying, "Hear ye, hear ye! Behold, the king Achashverosh is having a party to show off the glory of the splendor of his greatness." Right? What if it just said his wealth? One word would have sufficed, right? But no, it is the glory of the splendor of his greatness, the wealth of the honor of his kingdom. Right? Yamim Rabim Shmonim Ma'at Yom. For 180 days, which is a pretty long time to have a feast. Afterwards, the king makes for all the people found in Shushan, Migadol V'Akatan, from young and old, Mishesh Sheva Yamim, a feast for 7 days, B'chatzar Gina Bitan HaMelech, in the king's courtyard. Now, the next sentence, if you look in the translation, it's a bit misleading. I'm going to just translate it literally. Okay? Chor Karpath V'Techelek. White cotton, blue wool, caught up by cords of fine linen, purple wool to silver rods and alabaster columns. Right? And couches of gold and silver on a pavement of marble, alabaster, mother of pearl, and mosaics. I'm not 100% sure what all those materials are. Okay? But if you look carefully, what is missing from this sentence? In the typical, if you think of a typical structure of a sentence, what is not here? Periods. And if you look at the translation, there's little brackets there. It says there were hangings of. That's not in the text. It simply says a lot of fine, beautiful materials. Right? There was this, and there was that, and there was that, and there was gold, and it was great. What a party! And what impression do you get when you read that? Again?
Over the top.
So over the top, so overdone. Right? Achashverosh is doing so much to demonstrate what? I am king, I am powerful, I am wealthy. To sort of give over this sense of control. I got everything under control. And then you think about it, and does Achashverosh have everything under control? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What happens? What happens in this first paragraph? The very first paragraph, Vashti doesn't want to come in front of the kingdom, which we'll get to. He can't make decisions for himself. He doesn't know what to do. He asks his advisors. They give him this advice. He regrets it the next day. So you read this first chapter of the Megillah, and what is the impression we get? What is it doing? It's saying, on a simple level, you read and you think, wow, a great, powerful king. Not so fast. What you really get is this King Achashverosh, who's trying to portray himself as the great and powerful nobleman, he is so insecure. He is so insecure. He has to do so much just to show how powerful and wealthy he is, and yet he's not powerful at all.
Is this because Vashti really was the queen and he married her? And he wanted to prove his position?
So that is an important point. The Malbim talks about that, how he wanted to show, right? And you could argue that he's trying to show he's very powerful because he came into power on account of Vashti. I would argue that the point really is to mock Achashverosh. It is to mock the monarchy. And that is the point. We should be laughing at Achashverosh after reading chapter 1. Now this is an important point. And I think it also, beyond just studying the story of Purim, it tells us a lot about what Midrash does. We're about to read a selection from the Megillah. Talmud Megillah, the treatment of the story in the Talmud Bavli. And often what Midrash does is it tells us about the ethical and moral character of players in the story we might not have known otherwise. So you look at the Purim story at first glance, we know Haman's bad, we know Esther and Mordechai are good. Achashverosh, you could think, sort of neutral. He makes some bad decisions. Was he really evil? And the Talmud tells us no. Achashverosh is bad. Very bad. And not only is he bad, he's incompetent. Okay, take a look at source number 3. Achashverosh Amarav Echav Shel Rosh. Now they're expounding upon his name, Achashverosh. So the first idea is he is the brother of Rosh. The brother of the head. Uvengilo Shel Rosh. Achiv Shel Rosh, Achav Shel Nebuchadnezzar, Harasha Shenikra Rosh. Right? Nebuchadnezzar is referred to as the head, And Achashverosh is just like Nebuchadnezzar. He is the brother, in terms of his personality, of the king of Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel. Right? In what sense? Take a look at the bold. Hu harag, he bikesh laharog. Nebuchadnezzar murdered, Achashverosh tried to murder. Hu hachariv, hu bikesh lahachariv. Nebuchadnezzar destroys the temple, Achashverosh tries to destroy the temple. Just as evil in motivation, but he can't even do it. Right? He's this evil king who can't act upon his evil. He's incompetent. And then it continues. And I think the next one is a pretty important line. So it talks about, if you look at, as the paragraph continues, it says, Had we know Shemar b'machus ha'chashrosh b'chilat machuso kasvu sitno shvei Yudav Yerushalayim. It says in Ezra that when Achashverosh became king, he wrote in evil, in hate, upon the inhabitants of Judah and Yerushalayim, meaning he tried to stop the Beit HaMikdash from being rebuilt in the time of Ezra. He blackened the faces of the Jews in his time like someone who was singed by an oven. Rav Yochanan Amar Kolsha Zochro Amar Achlerosha. Achlerosha. Oh, my head. People hear Achashverosh's name, they say, it makes my head hurt. Like Rav Yochanan Amar Shakol Nasu Rashim B'Yamav. Everyone became poor in his time. Shenemar B'Yosem HaMelech Achashverosh Mas. Hu Achashverosh. He is Achashverosh. Hu B'Risho Michilato V'Yad Sofo. He was evil from beginning until the end. Point being, the point Medrash is making, and I think you see it here in the first chapter of the Megillah itself. Don't think Achashverosh is neutral. Don't think that he's this powerful, dominant king. He is incompetent. He is evil from beginning to end. And therefore, the person, or the being really behind the Megillah story, if it is not Achashverosh, who seems to be making decisions, then who is in fact behind everything happening? Clearly HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Clearly it's God making these decisions, because it can't be Achashverosh, because he doesn't get anything done that he wants to. So that is point number one, and what the Midrash does here is it fills in some of the gaps that we have upon Achashverosh's character. I would love to hold for questions, but we're running a little bit low on time, so if you could just please hold us till afterward. Thank you so much. The next point, the next part of the story is we have Queen Vashti. Now, looking at the story itself, how would you judge Queen Vashti in this story? From the words itself. You can look at the source number 4 inside before we have this answer. I think on the first glance, Queen Vashti, we don't really know too much. She refuses to come in front of the king. Does she do that because she's modest? Maybe. Maybe she has other reasons. We don't know. But from the story itself, unclear as to whether or not Vashti is, a modest queen, just normal, or something else. Well, the Gemara in Megillah takes a stance on this, and it tells us that no, Vashti was not being modest. She was not modest at all. She had other motivations behind refusing to appear in front of Achashverosh. Now, why would the Gemara in Megillah do that? Why is that important to the Gemara in Megillah? Why do we care about Vashti's motivation? Yes?
We don't want her portrayed as the story of Esther, not the story of
Okay, very good. But again, I think to add up on that, the Gemara in Megillah wants to draw a clear contrast. To add upon your point, there's Esther and Mordechai on one side, and the Jewish people on one side, and then there are the people, the royalty, the monarchy. And in their view, the monarchy are not actually monarchy. They're not noble. Their behavior isn't noble. Within that standpoint, within that perspective, Vashti can't be this normal, modest queen. Of course not. And that is ultimately what the Gemara says. We know, many of us know the famous Midrash. What happens? Achashverosh wants Vashti to come in front of her, and why doesn't she come? So the Gemara says because she grew a tail, right? Really, and she wanted to do this the whole time. They both wanted to intermingle between the genders, right? If you look at the story at first glance, it seems like a pretty religious affair. There's the women in one part of the palace, and there's the men in the other part of the palace. And the Gemara says, no. Vashti also wanted to sin, but an angel came and made her grow a tail. And she was embarrassed about how she looked, And it just goes on to mock the whole scene. The Achashverosh is celebrating, and he says, I had this beautiful wife. Do you want to come and see her? They say, sure, only if she's naked. He's like, great, sounds good. And then Vashti refuses. The Gemara adds, if you look in source number 5, the reason this happened is because she made people work for her on Shabbat while they weren't clothed. Therefore, she was punished in the same way. Again, what is the upshot of the Midrash? Achashverosh, Vashti, both have incredibly depraved behavior, horrible characters, not modest in any way, and both of them are not really monarchy, as much as we see that they are. And it's making fun of the whole culture of this feast. Right? And that's part of the point of it. We're laughing at the culture that existed in Persia at the time. So we covered Achashverosh, we covered Vashti. Who's the real joke on in the Megillah story? Haman. Now, and I think again, we see this in the story itself. If you look in chapter 6 and chapter 7 of the Megillah, as we mentioned, Haman goes, he's so excited to hang Mordechai on the tree, the opposite happens. Haman is seen on bowing down to Esther, begging on his knees for his life, and what happens? Achashverosh walks in and he says, what, you're taking my wife also with me in the house? Right? So clearly, within the story itself, we see that the Megillah is making fun of Haman. But I think there is an important perspective to add here, which is as follows. You could get the impression that Haman really ascended to power, he ascended to royalty, everything was going great, and at the end of the Megillah, things are turned around, and the opposite happens. But that is not the perspective that the Midrash wants us to have here. Take a look at source number 7. Or I'll skip 6 for in the interest of time. Source number 7 says as follows. After these things, the king Achashverosh made Haman great. Zehu shamar katuv, ki risha'im yovedu v'oivei Hashem ki yikar karim. That the wicked are destroyed and the enemies of the Lord like precious cows. She'em mifa'min otam l'tovatan ela letivcha. We do not fatten them for their own good, but rather to be slaughtered. Kach, Haman HaRasha lo nikadel ela mapalto. Haman the wicked was only made great so that he could have a greater downfall. Mashal adam l'hashaytelo sacha v'chamara v'chazira. This can be akin to a parable in which someone had a young a foal, a young donkey, and a pig. Right, I'll just say the parable outside. So they had a donkey and her daughter and this pig. And they're watching the pig, he's getting fattened up, fed, all this delicious food. And they just get a little bit and they say, it's not fair. We work hard all day and we don't get fed, the pig gets fed. And her mother responds, just wait, you'll see what happens to the pig. And of course, a few days later, it says before the holiday, what happens to the pig? They chop his head off. And her mother says, see, I told you so. The next day, they try to feed this young donkey, and she says, okay, I don't want the food, it's fine. And her mother says, it's not about the food, it's about the fact that they're idle, like the pig doesn't do anything. So too, the king Achashverosh raised Haman. What is the point of the Midrash? It is not just that at the end of the day, Haman falls. The whole time, Haman's greatness isn't real. It's a facade. It's an illusion. The Hamans and Achashveroshes of the world, we see them. It seems like they're great, but God only raises them so that He can make them fall later. If you look in the source number 8, I'm not going to read the whole thing inside. It's a different parable, but it references the pasuk we say every Shabbat. When the wicked sprout like grass, why is it? It's hishamdam ade'ad. It's that they should be destroyed eternally. The greatness that we see is not real greatness. It's an illusion. We shouldn't think that Haman and Achashverosh were great, and then Haman falls. He was never great. That is always the case. And that, I think, and this is one of my favorites, is very much accentuated in source number 8. We alluded to the story before about how Mordechai is paraded Haman parades Mordechai in front of the whole kingdom, saying this is what you do to someone whom the king wants to honor. So the Midrash and the Gemara goes to town with this idea. And the idea is we are mocking Haman. It is a joke. Haman is a laughing stock. Take a look at source number 50. On that night, the king could not sleep well. Says in Midrash number 1, on that night, the king of all the seat, the throne, the king of all kings, moved. Meaning God was the one who was really woken up on that night. And therefore, the king in the ground, the king of the earth, also couldn't sleep well. Meaning God is making this happen. His nightmare, why can't he sleep? He's having a nightmare how Haman wants to murder him. Now think of the irony here. It's not just that Achashverosh looked at the book, as we'll see. It's that his nightmare was about Haman going to murder him. And what happens that night? Haman is standing outside of the palace and knocking at his door in the middle of the night. Not exactly what you want to see. We just had a nightmare about someone trying to murder you. Continues the Midrash. V'amar livnei Haman. He says to Haman's children. You read in the Megillah that someone was reading the book of what happened to the king in front of Achashverosh at night. Well, the Midrash says it was Haman's own children who were reading that book. And what do they read? As we know, I'll just say this part outside. What do they read? They read that a long time ago, some people tried to murder King Achashverosh, and Mordechai saved them. And it talks in the Midrash, you look at it inside yourself, they didn't want to read that, and they were trying to erase it, but the angel makes it be read by itself. Okay, and then what happens? So they say, so bring Haman. And he's right there outside. Take a look at the fifth line of this Midrash. So, we said to him, Hamelech, the king said, I want to raise one person who gave me my life. There can't be anyone else whom the king wants to honor. Okay. So, this is what the children of Amalek do, attributing Haman to the descendants of Amalek. They always say things, they don't say what's in their heart. Okay. So, Amar Haman, I'll say things, so I should be a king, just like Achashverosh. Amar lo, bring the royal garment. That the king wore when he became king. And bring the horse that you rode when you became king. Right? And on and on. And put the crown that was on your head when you became king. Because he got very angry about that. He even wants to bring the crown. He wants to be king so badly. So, and then the Medrash says, you look inside yourself, Haman gets angry. Then it goes on. I'll just say it outside because we're running out of time, unfortunately. It says, well, he had to do it to Mordechai. So he goes to Mordechai, Haman, and he says, okay, we're going to get you in the king's clothes. Mordechai says, but I'm dirty. I've been mourning and fasting the last few days. I can't wear royal garments. So Haman says, okay, take it back. And Esther closes every bathhouse in the kingdom of Persia. And then Haman has to give Mordechai the bath himself. And Haman has to give Mordechai the haircut himself. Haman has to put the clothes on Mordechai. Haman bends down on the ground so Mordechai can stand on Haman and go onto the donkey, onto the horse himself. He kicks Haman on his way up. And Haman says, what are you doing? Doesn't it say in the Bible that you shouldn't laugh while your enemies are down and suffering? And Mordechai says, not about you. That's not talking about enemies like you. Ha! Now, again, the point of the Midrash is picking up on something in the narrative. We're meant to see that Mordechai, who was in the depths, mourning, suffering, sackcloth, Haman is at the top of the monarchy, And that is just an illusion. And Hashem can make all of that change so quickly. And we laugh at Haman as he goes through all of these steps and belittles himself. And as was mentioned before, the trash on his head. It is a mockery of Haman. He is a disaster. He is the laughingstock of the story. But what is the point of all of this? And for that, we go to source number 10, because I know we're running out of time. If you look at source number 10, it talks about who is this Megillah about. There's an argument in the Talmud as to how much of the Megillah do you need to read. What's interesting is that we hold you need to read the entire Megillah, from the beginning until the end. And as I believe Rabbi Torchino will refer to, the reason that is because Achashverosh is the subject of the Megillah. The Megillah is about Tokfo Shel Achashverosh, Achashverosh's power. Now you and I think, why would the Megillah be about Achashverosh's power? The answer is because it's not really about Achashverosh's power. It's not really about how powerful Achashverosh is. It's about how Achashverosh thinks he is all powerful, but really he's a joke. But really he's an incompetent king. Because God is the one that's powerful. It also mentions in this Gemara how the Megillah is all about people have certain intentions, they have certain thoughts, but then what actually happens is not at all what they were thinking. I think part of the message of all of this is that what Purim is here to teach us is that things are not always as they seem, that the people who are powerful, the people who seem like they are on top, are not really always on top, that sometimes we're worried and we see wicked people in charge, and they're doing things that we don't like, and it makes us scared, but God is really in control the whole time. Ultimately, there's no reason to worry. Ultimately, the Purim story is not just about Purim. It's about life itself. It's about the world itself. And part of what we joke about on Purim, part of this frivolity, this lightheadedness, is about the joke upon the Hamans and Achashveroshes of the world. And how we joke about, as much as we think we understand, as much as we think we're in control, we're not really in control, because it's God in control. But God loves us, and we're His chosen nation. And we have a lot of reason to believe because of that. And that the Jews ultimately get the last laugh, and I believe that is a big part of the joy that we experience on Purim. Thank you very much for listening.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming out to learn Torah with us today. So I'm here to present the history portion of this morning's learning. And I really always loved history, even as a kid, because it gives some kind of tangibility to events that happened in the past. It really gets you to connect with the people who you learn about and the people who are really legends, but you realize that they're real people who existed and lived in a world, not in a vacuum. And as a kid, I really liked going. I took a family trip, down to Washington and Virginia to go to Mount Vernon, Washington's estate, and to go in the White House back when you were allowed to go in. I always felt like you're walking through these places, and George Washington and all these people who came in the past are kind of there with you. That you get to see, you get to walk in the places where they walked. I think the one exception was. Where I went to school, we lived about 5 minutes. It was about 5 minutes away from Thomas Paine's house. So somehow they scheduled a class trip there every year. So that got a little bit boring. But other than that, I always found history very interesting. And I think it's especially the case with Tanakh. Is the people who we learn about are larger than life. The messages are, of course, more profound than just the historical aspect. At the same time, they were real people. What they experienced and what happened wasn't in a vacuum. And so I'd like to explore some of that today. The challenge of history, the farther back you go, is the less evidence, the less artifacts there are. And it is particularly so when we go back a couple thousand years. And the Megillah itself is somewhat vague about when it happened. If you look at source 1, the opening verse in Megillas Esther, "Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh hamalach behodu b'yad kol sheves medina sheves medina." So now it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? So he was Achashverosh. We also ask the question, who Achashverosh? Who was Achashverosh in his days with this person? So who was he? So the Megillah really doesn't give much of a timeline in general. We have evidence that it was at least after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, that they were exiled, that they found themselves in Persia, but it doesn't give us exact information about when exactly it happened. And if we look at our classical sources, the Talmud and other places in Tanakh, particularly in the book of Ezra, so we find somewhat different accounts about when this took place. The Talmud in Talmud Bavli, in source 2, represented in source 2, places the events of the Megillah in between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple. If you look at this timeline, now the calendar in this point in history is very complicated for several reasons. One, there's a discrepancy between our calendar, the dating we call from creation, and the secular calendar. It's about 160 or so years off. So what I did here is I converted from our calendar, so from 3338 to the secular calendar. Not how it would turn out with our conversion, just to keep the consistency there. So 3338, according to the secular calendar, when the Beis Hamikdash was the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, was 587 BCE. So that's where we're starting from. So the order of the monarchy that the Talmud gives us is as following. If you look at the last three monarchs on the chart, so you have Cyrus, Koresh, who authorized the Jews to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, followed by Achashverosh, and then followed by Darius, Daryavish, the Persian, who under his rule actually allowed for the completion of the Beis HaMikdash. Notice here the dates: it started to be built in 516 and then was completed 4 years later. And just like the Talmud tells of Belshazzar and Achashverosh, who miscalculated the years between the two, actually also miscalculated, and that's why it's about 4 years off. But be that as it may, there's 70 years in between. And so it places Achashverosh right before the building of the second temple, and the son of Achashverosh and Esther as the one who authorized the completion of the second temple when at this point in history it came to somewhat of a halt. However, if you look at the account in the book of Ezra, so it gives a different version of the monarchy and the succession. So it places, so first it has Cyrus, but then you have Darius, and then you have Achashverosh. So Achashverosh and Darius are switched. And so it seemed, therefore, if Darius was the one who, in his reign, the second temple was completed, so that places Achashverosh, and really by extension the Purim story, in the early second temple period, not in the period between the first and second temples. So this, as far as putting together pieces of historical evidence that we have, so the approach from Ezra makes things quite interesting, because as far as evidence that we have. And again, the evidence from, just by nature, history this far back is somewhat limited, but it has many similarities to the account that we have in Ezra. If you look at source 4, so it tells us about the Achaemenian dynasty, which really began in the 6th century BCE and ended in the 4th century BCE when it was conquered by Alexander the Great. And if you look 3 lines up in the second paragraph, so it tells us the succession. It says Cyrus II, Cyrus the Great, then you have Cambyses, followed by Darius I. And in the second paragraph, so it has Darius I, and then Xerxes. We don't have an Ahasuerus, but we have a monarch named Xerxes. And under the reign of Xerxes, so the empire extended as far west as Macedonia and Libya, and as far east as the Hyphasis River. So if we understand from Hodu to Kush, as this one opinion the Talmud does from India to Ethiopia, so what we see is how the empire expanded under the reign of Xerxes. So you have from Libya, which is right near Ethiopia, and the Hyphasis River, which is to the north of India. So we see parallels of how the empire grew during that period. And you turn on to the second page, so you have in the last 3, you have Darius, who you see that his reign, during his reign was that year of 516 to 512, when the second Beis HaMikdash was constructed and completed, followed by Xerxes. So similar to in Esther, where we find Darius and then Ahasuerus, and then we have Artaxerxes or Artaxerxes. If anyone can say that 5 times fast, they can get an extra Mishloach Manos. So that's the order of the dynasty. Now we have Darius and we have Artaxerxes, which are the same names that are presented in Ezra. However, who is this Xerxes? Meaning, do we have any reason to say that Xerxes is Ahasuerus? So I found on Encyclopedia Iranica, which probably specializes in Iranian history, that Xerxes is the common Greek and Latin form, a little bit different, of the Achaemenian name, which is Old Persian spelled however that is, but it's pronounced Shar Yarsha. And then you see the Hebrew, it's similar. If you want to go and look up the pronunciation, there's an audio recording which is about 1 second long. It says very quick. The audio is not very good. So last night I was listening. I was holding my computer speakers aren't so good. I was like holding up to my ear. My wife asked what I was doing, but I told her, and nothing out of the ordinary. So we see that there's a etymological connection between Xerxes and the Iranian Persian form of the name. What makes this more interesting is, if you look at source 6, in the last chapter of the book of Esther, so while the name is pronounced Ahasuerus, so it's spelled similar to what we find of the Iranian name. It's spelled basically Ahasuerus, which is similar letters to the Iranian pronunciation of Xerxes. So, granted, this is somewhat conjecture, but we do find striking similarities between what we know about this era of the Persian dynasty and what we find in the book of Ezra. Even further, if we go with this approach, and just to be clear, I'm not saying that this approach is either more valid or preferable to the one found in the Talmud. But again, this order of the dynasty is something that's found in the book of Ezra, so it's found internally in our sources. And if we go with this approach, so we see, if we read the verses in the Megillah, we can see similarity between those verses and whatever the evidence that we have of this Persian Empire at this period in history, and particularly Xerxes. So if you look in source 7, the beginning of Xerxes' reign, so he came to power in 486 BCE, and then he had a military campaign with Egypt, and within a couple years he crushed these revolts, and basically they came to a rest in 484. So he came to power 486. So 486, 485, 484. What year of his reign is that? The third year of his reign. And so what does the Megillah tell us? Look at source 8. B'shna shalos l'malcho. So in the third year of Achashverosh's reign, asu mishte l'chol sarav v'vadav, and he made a big feast for all of the officers around. And he came there to show off his wealth, presumably to, and the Talmud says as much, presumably to show that, that he was in power, he meant business, and he was the king. So it would make sense, after he crushed this rebellion, now he's showing off. Now he's showing that he's in charge. But it showed even after this, so he still pursued other military conflicts, and when he was done with Egypt, so then he went on to Greece. Look at source 9, and this account is by Herodotus, which is really the main account that we have during this period, which again could have questions about its accuracy, but in the account that he gives, so there was military conflict in Egypt, and when did this basically come to an end? So in the period of 481 to 480 BCE, so you count down 486, 485, 484, 42, 42 to 41, and then you have in the 7th year. The 7th year of his reign, so things then quieted down with his conflict with Greece. And if you look at the Megillah, so in source 10, it tells us that things quieted down after Vashti was no longer in the picture. And in source 11, so when did he, call it in his perverse way, move on with his life? So, and when marry or take Esther, source 11, it says, B'tilakat Esther el HaMelech, Esther was taken to the king, Achashverosh, Beis Malchuso, B'chodesh Hasiri, Hu Chodesh Teves, B'shna Sheva L'Malchuso, in the 7th year of his reign. So there are different landmarks that happened in Achashverosh's reign. You could say once he established his rule, year number 3, he then makes a feast, he then shows off to all of the officers and dignitaries that he was in charge. Then when he was involved in other conflicts and those quieted down, so then he, in his own way, moves on with his life. So now when we find in the 7th year, he then married Esther. So do we find any evidence that if we plug in Xerxes as Achashverosh, do we have any evidence of Esther? So in source 13, it continues with the account of Herodotus. So he tells us about the wife of Xerxes. So he mentions Amistris, and linguistically, and I don't know ancient Persian or Babylonian, but linguistically, the consonants of Amistris include the sounds of MSTR, which is also the consonants that we find in Esther. So perhaps there's some linguistic connection between Esther and Amistris, the wife of Xerxes. Now, in the accounts of Herodotus, so it doesn't have a particularly flattering account of Amistris. That being said, history is written from the perspective of those who write it, and it makes sense that the people writing the history resented Esther in some way, which wouldn't be so hard to understand with what we know about with Esther being from the Jewish people, being from a foreign people. So again, it's not necessarily conclusive, but we have, if we plug in Xerxes as Ahasuerus, we can find some very interesting similarities between Xerxes and his career and what we find in Megillah's account of Ahasuerus is. Another difficulty that we find if we take this approach is the Megillah tells us, and this is really one of the indications there of when in history this occurred. It tells us about a Jewish man, source number 14, Ish Yehudi, a Jewish man, Hayy b'Shushan HaBira, who was in Shushan, the capital, and Shmo, his name was Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish, Ish Yemini. Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, Asher Hagla B'Yushalayim Im Hagolah Asher Hagalsa Im Yechanya Melech Yehuda, Asher Hagla Nebuchadnezzar Bet Melech Babel. So he tells us about this man, his lineage, who has been exiled when, in the aftermath of Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of Jerusalem. So I think it's commonly understood that the subject is Mordechai himself, who, if we plug this in to post-building of the Second Temple, so now we're talking about 486 to 465 BCE. So if he was exiled, if we say that the destruction was in 587 BCE, so Mordechai would have been quite old at the point in history that this occurred. But it could also be reasonable to read the subject of this verse not necessarily as Mordechai himself, but if you look at it, so Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish, Ish Yemini, Asher Hagla Mishalayim. So who might the subject of the statement that he was exiled from Jerusalem? It may have been Kish. Who was, it says this lineage, and then it says who was exiled. So if we read it as Kish, so then it would make sense. So we wouldn't have Mordechai being extremely old at this point. So again, admittedly, this approach is somewhat conjecture. It may be reasonable conjecture, and there is the account in the Talmud, which places this in between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second one. But between the two approaches, we could say, why does it matter? Why does it matter? What does it mean for us? So we know that, at least in rabbinic literature, the Jews were criticized for attending the feast of Ahasuerus. In fact, Mordechai is said to have discouraged them, and it was really a sign of their assimilation and their comfort with their exile, with the general Persian society. So if we take the Talmud's approach, so what does it tell us? That they were comfortable in exile. There was a terrible tragedy. We read in the Book of Lamentations the terrible suffering when the temple was destroyed. But then, a couple decades go by, and they're used to it. They're comfortable. They're able to assimilate somewhat within the Persian society. And that's really an indictment of them. They don't realize that this isn't an ideal. If we take the approach that this was already when the second temple was built, so that's consistent with what we find described in Ezra and Nehemiah, that really those amazing things. We were allowed to return to Yerushalayim, to the land of Israel, but a lot of people didn't bother going up. They were comfortable in Babylonia, staying where they were. So we could read this in this time period, that the Jews, they had the opportunity to go back, Nevertheless, they were comfortable where they were. They attended the monarch's feast, and it could be perhaps somewhat of a different understanding with how we view the Jew in exile. Is it that they assimilate because they have no other option? Even then, they have to remember that they're in exile. Or is it even when there is the option to go back to Eretz Yisrael, maybe they don't take advantage of it, and maybe they're more comfortable integrated in the society where they are. And in both cases, we see, as has been shown throughout history, that even when the Jews are comfortable where they are, it only lasts so long, and there's going to be someone who's going to want to get rid of them. So that really applies in either period that this story takes place. So I hope that this gave some tangibility to the Purim story. These aren't just legends and larger-than-life figures, which of course they are, but are also events that happened, people who existed, and really during the period they existed, so different things were going on, and hopefully it could give deeper meaning with how we understand the background to the Megillah story. Have a wonderful Purim.
Thank you, Rav Alex. If anyone needs to refresh their refreshments, that's really fine. Good. Sorry? Sorry?
Is there a break for 5 minutes, or do you want to?
All right, I'll give you a 2-minute break to be able to get refreshments, and then start.